Okay, yeah. So if I had to describe to somebody what it was like to live in Brooklyn and grow up in Brooklyn, especially during this, when I was born, 60s and 70s and 80s, I would have to say it was probably a very communal feel. People spent a lot of time outside and outdoors. As kids, we were always playing outside. We were rarely in the house on summer days or spring or fall days. We came in when the lights went on, when the street lights went on. That was sort of the rule. Once they popped on, that's when you needed to come in and, get back to your house. The kids on the block would play with each other. There was a real just communal feel to it. You walk to school. Very few of us took the bus. Just groups of us would walk to school, and hang out on the stoops at night. And it was a very, social community kind of place to be. I think at first my mother may have been a little unsure about it because that was not really something that women did. You became secretaries and receptionists. Like if you were going to have a job, you worked in an office. But my father was very, very supportive, like totally supportive. I mean, and my mother was too, but I think she came on board maybe a little bit later. It took her a little longer. And I get it. She was just worried. It was just out of concern. But I would say overall they were. I remember when I was in high school, they met with me and at that point, like the dean of the art department, Mr. Greenberg, to talk about what I needed to do to have that be like a major and a focus. So I would say overall they were very supportive. I was pretty lucky in that. The college experience was very different for me, in part because I commuted to college and I had to take the subways on a daily basis to get, to and from school. And that in of itself, even though it wasn't that far, it would take sometimes anywhere from 1 hour, hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on what was happening on the subways. Because I was an art student and I needed to travel on the subways, that meant I also had to take artwork and portfolios that I was working on at home to and from school, to and from the college. So there are quite many times I needed to transport either completed paintings or canvases that were maybe not worked on, but I had framed them up at home. And so they would be sometimes like 2.5, 3 feet tall by 5 feet long. So I had to always, I'd cover them up so people wouldn't ask me too many questions about the painting because I didn't want to have that dialogue when I was traveling on the subway. But I would always have to position myself to maybe get on the last car, which is the worst place you want to be too, because there's no exit from the last car. In a nutshell, if I had to give you some kind of sensibility of what my process is and what I hope to get, it is about surface and texture. That's why you'll see things are blown up. The fruits are blown up, even with the bodies. I don't care so much about the face, but it's about, the surface and the skin tones and the shading and the nuances that are happening on the body, not so much what the face looks like. The issue that drew me the strongest when I was in college was issues around women's rights, definitely. Issues around, being pro-choice and, pay equity, things like that. Violence against women, I think probably that was like, a really key issue for me in college. So I would say if you had to look at, like, who are the women that came to the peace encampment, I would say a good majority of them were probably self-identified as lesbians. Very, very strong political activism. Anti-war, anti-nuclear, very anti-racist, pro-choice. Women who worked on, some of these women have worked on anti-war and social justice issues their whole lives. The age range would be anywhere from college students up to women who were in their 60s and 70s who would visit the peace camp and participate in all sorts of, civil disobedience. Key component was very nonviolent. One of the events that we did was a Mother's Day march, and we wanted to just have a little picnic. And there was only about a half a dozen of us. That was it. We had a couple of signs, we had our picnic basket, and the Army Depot had two entrances. And one was on the side of town close to where we were, and the other one was all the way on the other side of the depot, which is, I think, 15,000 acres. So by the time to get around there, it was about a 20-minute drive. So it was an inconvenience if you had to go around in the far entrance. So we just went down, walked down through the streets, had our little signs and had our picnic baskets, and just were letting people know we're still here. We know that what's going on at the depot, and we're still, a presence. and all that kind of stuff. And we just sat on this little grassy part right by the entrance, like half a dozen women, and totally non-threatening, nothing even remotely, in your face kind of activism. And they closed down the entrance. They just shut it down. We were stunned. We were floored that just us and our presence being there was enough for them to say, what might they do next? Could there be another group somewhere circling behind? I don't know really what they were thinking, but they shut the entrance down, and all the people that were coming into work had to, switch around the other way. So it was kind of interesting that you can still have that kind of impact on what, the Army at that point would do or not do, just based on your being there, even as just a small group. So while I was at Ithaca Rape Crisis, we did get a lot of attention for some of the work that we were doing because it was different. We focused on, LGBTQ community. We also focused on men as survivors and as victims, not just as perpetrators. Victims cannot prevent sexual assault. The only people that can prevent sexual assault are those that perpetrate it and all the issues that lead up to that. So we were very progressive in how we approach things. We wanted to create a safe space so that people could ask questions and say things that in the past they might have been told, no, don't say that, that's wrong. We wanted them to say those things so we could jump off of that and have a discussion, because that's the only way you're going to really get to the root of it, is if, and the reality is men being the predominant perpetrators of sexual assault have the opportunity to talk about things that they're not so sure about. Like, why is this okay? Why is that not okay? So we really worked hard to try to create those environments and opportunities so we could really get at some of the root issues, to really have a dialogue, start a dialogue on that. And of course, the outreach that we did to lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender issues around sexual assault. Some of the specific issues they faced regarding law enforcement, prosecution, reporting the crimes, all those sorts of things. The biggest conference that I went to at Rape Crisis probably was the annual National Coalition Against Sexual Assault Conference. That was in New Orleans. And we made a proposal to present a program actually on LGBTQ issues. We created, flyers and handouts. I even made these little laminated bookmarks. And when I got down there, before we even did the presentation, you had to submit all the materials that you were going to use in your program, including any flyers or handouts or packets that you were going to have. And they took one of the bookmarks that I had made and they copied them up, and that bookmark, which is a little laminated bookmark, and had information on LGBTQ issues and sexual assault, just like some pinpoint issues, they had put that in every packet of every participant, hundreds and thousands of people that came to this conference. So we were pretty thrilled about that. I think there was always that bigger image and picture of this, it's got to be better than this. It has to be. We have to be able to live together in a better way. That women need to be safer, that children need to be safer, that we really need to stop the craziness that happens with, countries fighting, going to war. So that was always there, in a very concrete, let's make it better, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, let's move down this line. But I think, if really to be honest, on a very personal level, it was my own personal journey of finding my voice, learning to be stronger, learning to be more confident, and understand that this is also my reality. At that point I wasn't sure if I was going to have kids or not, but certainly by the time I left Rape Crisis, that was huge. It's very cliche, but I wanted the world to be a better and safer place for my kids. So it was personal and political, because as they say, there's always the link, personal is political. So I think one of the things that I probably learned through this whole process is when an issue is important to us, it burns so deep inside of you. And sometimes through that intensity of the burning, I did kind of lose sight of the big picture, and that we are all people together on the planet, and we all have our experiences. And as I started to mature, and I think that's also what enabled me to do the work I did. I couldn't have done the work I did at Ithaca Rape Crisis when I was 19 or 20 or 20. I could not have. It burned so hot that I would have just, I couldn't have had those discussions with people that were asking questions that other educators would be like, how can you stand there and let him ask you that? And I looked at it as an opportunity, but they were looking at it as I would have just told them to sit down and shut up. So I think as you go through your process of working on social justice issues, let that burn hot and bright inside of you, but never lose sight that you gotta hear what people have to say. That's how we move forward. If we don't listen to what people have to say, even if it angers us, we're never gonna get to the other side. We have to be able to have those discussions even though they're hard. So I would say that's my advice. Just kind of keep that balance. Keep fighting on and stay patient and stay on your path, but always be open to hear what other people have to say, because it is important, even if you don't agree with it.